Budget speech, lots of surprises actually. No major tax increases on personal income tax, corporate income tax, and of course VAT. That's a wonderful thing, of course. We are going to have to pay more in terms of sin taxes. That was inevitable. We're going to be paying more in terms of the road fuel levy, and we're also going to be paying a levy for the road accident fund. These were inevitable and they were likely to come up. Of course, the big surprise is that government is going to be cutting 156 billion rand off its non-interest expenditure that is on the essentials, your education, health, police, security, etc. They're going to be cutting that amount of money over the next 3 years, and this is due in part to some of the pressure that they've been under in terms of sorting out SOEs. But anyway, I understand that my colleague Minister Tito Mboweni does have a guest with him to get some political reaction from the Finance Minister's speech. Let's cross over to him.
Yes, I have Mr. Steve Swart from the ACDP. Mr. Swart, thank you very much for coming. Your take on the Minister's speech?
Well, I think there were a number of positives to take from the speech as well as a number of negatives. Obviously, the positives that one does see is that there was no increase in personal taxes, no increase in VAT. But then on the negative side, we do see the budget deficit increasing to 6.8%. And of course, the government debt levels increasing significantly, which will result in 229 billion rand being spent on government debt service costs. So that needs to be addressed. From our side, the ACDP, we've long been saying, give the National Prosecuting Authority, the Hawks and the Asset Forfeiture Unit additional funds. There's 2.4 billion rand additional funds to lock away people involved in corruption and to recover the ill-gotten gains. That we welcome very much. Obviously, the whole wage bill is going to be very interesting. Whilst we welcome the 160 billion saving in that regard, it's going to take some negotiation. It's going to take some sacrifice. We are, at the end of the day, very concerned about the long-term fiscal sustainability of our debt, and that needs to be stabilized.
Mr. Swart, thank you very much for your time. That Mr. Steve Swart from the ACDP. I guess my colleague Bulelane is having another guest, and we cross over to Bulelane.
Well, we're continuing to take political reactions right here in front of the National Assembly. Of course, now joining me is the DA spokesperson on finance, Jordan Hill-Lewis. A lot of things that the finance minister has said. Of course, issues of growth still under 1%, as well as revising downwards the budget. Your take on this?
The Minister has made the right decision by prioritizing growth as his number one focus, and that's why there's been no tax increases and in fact a little bit of tax decreases for personal income tax. That's good news, that's pro-growth, and that's helpful to the economy. It's also good news that he's focusing on cutting the public wage bill. However, we must stress that those numbers still need to be negotiated with the public sector unions themselves, so we can't take them as a given. I think it was a little bit irresponsible of the Minister to include them in the budget when they haven't been negotiated yet. But overall, given that the Minister has got very little moving room, I think he's done the best that he can to try and get the economy growing today and try and return some money back to people's pockets. And for that reason, we welcome it. We just are a little bit concerned about those public wage figures, that they are not credible.
He's talked about consolidating public entities, also about 60 billion for Eskom and SAA. Of course, the issue of SOEs is still the elephant in the room.
Yeah, I'm afraid that is the one piece of bad news, another big 16 billion rand bailout for SAA. That's just not acceptable. We keep prioritizing these failing zombie state-owned entities over the basic services that the public really needs, and that is not a good choice. We're very sad to see that he's again given money to SAA. Again, we say, just sell it. The state should not own an airline.
All right, thank you so much. Jordan Hill-Lewis, he's the spokesperson of the DA for Finance. Nompu will cross back to you in studio.
Thanks very much for that, Bulelani. Of course, I'm joined in studio by Busisiwe Khadebe. She's an economist at Nedbank. Thanks very much for joining us.
Lovely to have me.
Good stuff. So, that surprise, no major increases on, personal income tax, corporate tax, VAT. Of course, some within your ilk were suggesting maybe we'd get an extra VAT increase. Were you surprised?
I wasn't surprised at all. I mean, the economy is not doing that great. If you look at how sort of tax revenues have underperformed over the last couple of years, you can't now all of a sudden expect something great to happen there. So I wasn't surprised at all. What I was probably surprised about was on the other side of things, what they were doing with expenditure and how sort of deep the cut was and where they were going to get most of that money they were cutting from. So those were the big sort of surprises, but not so much on the revenue side, because you can't really they were trying to get blood from a stone, so you wouldn't really expect that to happen. So you expected some of that tax relief that you saw, but on the other side, the expenditure one is what I was surprised by.
Of course, on the expenditure side, they're looking to cut about 156 billion rand over the next 3 fiscal years. That's quite hectic indeed. What is that going to mean for things like service delivery?
I mean, the bulk of it actually comes from the public sector wage bill. So if you look at if it's teachers, if it's whatever they're going to do of that bulk, so it does mean probably it's not going to be as lovely if they're going to cut from teachers or things like that, but we have to see what they're going to do. So if you look at education and we say we're spending a lot on education, the bulk of that are those salaries they're doing. So they may be trying to, over the medium term, in real terms, slightly decrease the amount on that, but I don't think we'll see how it actually plays out. I don't think it's that a big deal, because I think when you look in the past, they usually used to say, you know what, we're going to increase the wage bill by inflation +1, and then when we get sort of to the next year, it was way more than that, because they were looking at things like uniform allowance and night shift allowance, and that was blowing things up. And where they're trying to cut, it was some of that it was coming through. It was pay progression and some of those extra benefits that they were looking at that we actually expected them to do in the past, and they didn't do in the past. So that's what they're looking at as well.
One of the people that my colleagues just interviewed on the steps just now, a politician, said, I think he's from the DA, said he thinks it's rather irresponsible for them to factor in those numbers, those cuts, because it's mainly coming from the public sector wage deals when they haven't actually begun to negotiate. Your thoughts?
I mean, they're going to have to. Maybe there is an agreement with unions already. I don't think they'll just come out there and just say this is what we're doing, and they're going to unilaterally decide that's what they're going to do. I think there must have been a conversation somehow. There's still a year left over of sort of the multiple sort of agreement they've got, so they're going to have a look at that. But I don't think they would unilaterally do that. There must have been a conversation.
Let's wait and see. We're going to continue our conversation, but we're just going to cross very quickly to Manalise, who's got Mr. Mgwankwa